like, I don't even know. They're like dry spots, but I don't know what's happening. I feel like I'm turning into like a snake. There's like random patches
It's this
on
time
my
of
face. I'm like, hello.
And then you like try to put a drop of makeup on and it's just like completely dried up and crusty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome. Welcome back. Where literally nothing matters except for moisturizer.
Oh.
Stay moisturized.
What moisturizer are you using?
Stay alert. Okay, on my face, I've been using like a Neutrogena, just like
Hydro Boost?
Yeah, Hydro Boost with an SPF in it because I'm not trying to do 2 products.
Because it's just shining out there.
Yeah.
The sun is just shining.
Should be sunny.
He's afraid of some vitamin D. That's what I'm getting from that.
You're supposed to wear SPF every day on your face.
That's debunked.
Is it though?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It is.
Is it?
Yeah.
By who?
Like the super nuanced
like
Instagram.
The Maha influencers.
Yes, like you should be drinking raw milk and
burns. Yes, for sure.
Just to make sure you get that vitamin D in there.
I don't know.
Skin
cancer is real. So I'm going to wear my SPF on my face at least.
If it's not one thing, it's the other.
Yeah, this is true.
You know?
This is true.
I like never even have time to wash my face or put anything.
Yeah.
So that's why my face is falling.
Yeah. You're like, and that's the crux of my problem.
Yep.
Well, also the winter is like so freaking difficult in New England.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you.
For sure. Super interesting stuff. Hard-hitting news today, guys.
Take it all in.
Hard-hitting news. What moisturizer are you using? Go off in the comments. Well, how you been this week besides being dry and crusty?
Good.
Self-proclaims dry and crusty. I don't think that you're dry and crusty.
You know, don't look too close. We're good. We are just bopping around, drinking too much caffeine, having that hard hit around 2 p.m., you know.
Yeah.
Love a
nice
crash. Yeah, pretty good. What about you?
Good. We went skiing this weekend, which was lovely. I definitely tried a little bit too hard, which I did not intend to. I really went for the looks and for tearing up an easy green.
The truth comes out.
Yeah.
Okay, I need to say something. It's judgy.
Oh, you can judge.
Something about skiing gives me the ick.
Well, I would say that like in general, like the stereotype of skiers is like pretentious rich people for sure.
And like it's a deep rooted thing, honestly. If I like went deep into my subconscious, it's because like it is a wealthy thing. Like I've never been skiing.
Yeah.
I'm too afraid to now. I'm too old to now. Like I can't try that.
Yeah.
What if I failed?
I mean,
fell. What if I was embarrassing? Like
I will say that is the difference of going when you're in your 30s. Because I hadn't been in like 5 years or something, like well before the pandemic. And the whole entire time when I went this weekend and then when I went out with Galen on the trip, like the whole time I start like going too fast. I'm like, my knees, my ACL, like it's just one wrong turn and it's all over.
Yeah. Yeah, something about it. I'm like, I feel like I never did it because I never had any money growing up. And now I'm like, ew, those people.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I'm going to judge you guys
you can judge
instead of having to get deep into my psyche and process that. So.
Well, Mark, of course, is like cool guy snowboarder, like so chill. Yeah.
Mark's king.
Actually, Mark tore up. We had never been skiing together because neither one of us had been in like 5 years. And that's as long as we've been together. So and one, he obviously was a very easy person to go with because he was very chill and just like down to go at my pace. But he impressed me with his skills.
Good.
I was like, oh my God, do I like you?
Oh, you're cute today. And then
like on the
all this and is like sweating and gross.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Goodbye. It was fun though. We went to Sunday River and definitely like it's a bigger mountain than like a lot of other New England mountains. So like a lot of different lifts you can really like explore like throughout. So you're not just like constantly going up and down. But they had this like big igloo bar.
Ooh.
So like halfway down the mountain, they like definitely built some structure and then built a igloo around it. But it had like all these different like pathways inside of it, and there was a bar inside of it and like a DJ outside. So we like stopped and grabbed a drink and then got a little mountain waffle. So there's like a little cart.
The thing, right?
I'm like, this is why I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm here to see an igloo. I'm here to eat a freaking waffle on the side of the mountain, and I'm going to tear up these greens like you wouldn't believe. The greens are like the easiest, like step up from a bunny hill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love it.
So I'm just there for the vibes.
Yep. Yeah. For the pic.
Yeah. Yeah. For the pics. To make myself feel better for buying that snowsuit for just a single day of skiing.
How much does a snowsuit run you these days?
Okay. That one, like, wasn't that bad compared to others.
But you're not telling me a price.
Okay, well, I would say, I mean, like, an expensive winter coat is what, like, $300 something.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, that plus pants.
That's expensive.
But then, yeah, so, like, I got my snowsuit.
It's really cute, though.
For, like, $300.
Okay,
which wasn't bad because
No,
most of the other snowsuits that I saw were, like, a couple $100 more than that.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I was going to buy new snow pants and a new winter coat, it would have been like $600.
Yeah.
So I'm basically saving money. It was basically free.
It was basically free in girl math.
Yeah.
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 Man, things are expensive lately. Just like everything. Just
leaving the house is expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like I leave the house and instantly just, like, spend $100 somehow.
On nothing.
Nothing. And I will say, I don't feel like it's just groceries. Like, I know that groceries are more expensive, but, like...
No, it's everything.
I don't feel like groceries are that... I don't know, maybe it's where I'm shopping or something. They don't feel, like, astronomically more expensive than, like, they have in the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
It's just everything.
It's everything. Yeah. No, I completely agree with you.
But, okay, actually, I will say, though, since... deleting my Amazon Prime subscription.
Ooh.
Although, remember, Mark still has his, so, like, I am not like morally better than anyone. It was a pretty, like, low lift action step. But, like, since I deleted that and since I've been trying not to just, like, mindlessly spend at Target and stuff.
Yeah.
I actually, like, really have been spending a lot less.
Yeah. Good.
And, like, that definitely is not everyone's, like, fight to fight, because, like, some people live in the middle of nowhere and, like, they have to just order things on Amazon, or, like, you have 2 freaking kids. Getting like 2 kids in the car and going to the store, like, sometimes you gotta just press the button. Like,
just press
that is not your battle to fight.
All I do, and then Amy presses them right back. She's like, I know how to do that too.
Yes.
All right,
so
combo, different day.
Yeah. For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, today on the podcast, we have a convo that, like, I am pumped about. We did record it, like, 2 months ago, so I don't fully remember exactly how it went, but I do remember it being lovely.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful lady.
Yeah, wonderful lady. So we had this conversation with this self-defense coach who has created her own, like, self-defense workshop method that's based in, like, an empowered self-defense approach. So it's very from, like, the female gaze, and brings in a lot more of, like, identifying red flags, how to de-escalate situations, and, like, kind of talking about, like, the bigger picture of how a lot of times these instances happen not from a random stranger jumping out from your car, which, like, you can learn that stuff too. Of course, it's important, but also most of the time it's people that you know, whether it's, like, romantic partner or whatever. So we talk a lot about that. And then the conversation was so lovely, we decided that we wanted to host our own workshop. So mark your calendars. We're going to link it in the show notes. But we have a self-defense workshop coming your way in Burlington, Mass. on Sunday, April 6th at 10 a.m. 10 a.m. Santa's coming to town.
Gosh, I love that. Get the sneaks ready.
Yeah, get the sneaks ready. It's gonna be great. It'll be like a 90-minute workshop followed by some free bevies and snacks and mingling and chats. We're gonna have some really awesome raffle prizes. Tickets will come with a nice little gift bag of goodies. So come for a nice, empowering day.
Yeah. And this is our first event, so we're so excited. Please come and support us. I feel like we've been working really hard on kind of, like, branching out and trying to connect with more people. And we've been pretty successful with it. So we feel confident in starting this. So come and hang with us. Like, even if you just want to come meet us, it's going to be low key. And if you're like me and are already like, oh my God, self-defense, that's going to be scary. It's like a workout. People are going to be looking at me.
No.
I'll be
Safe
in the
space.
back, like doing the least.
Yeah.
Okay.
Safe space.
So it's not gonna be like an intense like cardio workout. Everyone's looking at you. You need to pass this to like become self-defendant or whatever. Easy breezy. And it's part of a conversation too. It's not like all just like, let's get on a mat and take each other out.
Yeah.
And that's
There'll be
kind of like
discussions.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of like what's gonna excite me is like the conversation about it and like figuring out like vulnerabilities just in your everyday life and how we can just be aware and talk through those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And like Caitlin was just saying, we are so excited to like really bring this community to life and out into the world off of a screen and actually like meet some of the people that listen. And so we're excited to like actually build some friendships out of this too.
Be our friend.
But also, yeah, like obviously these conversations are so important and violence against women is such a big problem all over the world, but also now specifically in our country too. And so if you have any friends, I feel like it'd be a good thing to go to together, but also a great event to go to alone because hopefully you'll make some new friends if you're a girl mom and have like an older daughter come together, because I feel like also these are great conversations for young women to have learning about red flags and how to identify certain characteristics in a partner too.
And if you want to come by yourself and you're kind of afraid to, reach out to us on slide into our DMs.
Yes.
And we'll be your friend.
Yeah, we'll make you a mat spot next to us, and
I'll set up all your props.
Yeah,
everything you need, I'll be there. I'll be there with you. So I feel like that can be scary too. Being like, oh, I really want to do this, but my friend's not free that day. Like,
and making friends as an adult is like
it's hard. It's awkward out there,
Yeah. So like this will make it less difficult.
Yeah.
Love it. Enjoy. Bye.
Bye.
Today's guest is going to help us find our power. She is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and studied under Professor Murilo Santana at Unity Jiu-Jitsu School in New York City. She is also an adjunct professor of women's and gender studies at New Jersey City University. Combining her expertise, she founded Feminist Self Defense in 2014 to help women break through their very justified fear of violence and discover their power. Feminist self-defense recognizes that while women are never responsible for preventing violence against themselves, as that responsibility rests entirely on the perpetrator, feminist self-defense proves that women can be active players in liberating themselves from control and violence. Her research based in trauma-informed workshops have reached thousands nationwide and caught the attention of numerous media outlets, including ESPN, The New York Times, The Economist, Insider, and more. Welcome to Literally Nothing Matters, Rachel Piazza.
Yay, thank you. Thanks for having me.
For coming on. We're so excited to talk to you. And even though it's kind of like a heavy topic, it can also be really empowering.
Totally true. I like to make what can be a difficult topic just feel fun. And it can oftentimes feel fun just to kind of take that control back or just for a moment sort of practice, having power, which sometimes feels elusive. So.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, yesterday I was taking just like a regular boxing workout class.
Oh, cool.
And there was a point also where I was like, like, I am so powerful.
Yes, it can feel very cathartic for sure.
Yeah, those small moments. Well, okay, before we dive too deep into it, why don't you give us a little bit more background on you and, what really drew you to starting these workshops and getting into this work?
Sure. So I think I have somewhat of a unique story in that I started training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu around the same time that I decided to pursue a master's degree in women's and gender studies. So I sort of had one foot in this hyper-masculine, combat sport environment, very male-dominated. And on the other side, I was studying, about gender studies, how violence is, embedded in our culture, how patriarchal and oppressive systems impact us. And it really gave me, I think, a view of both of those worlds and sort of how we typically or traditionally approach women's safety or self-defense. And I really saw firsthand how self-defense programs were really embedded in a patriarchal framework. So there was sort of this hypermasculine, our stereotype is there's this hypermasculine man, oftentimes with a military or law enforcement background, who is there to protect women and teach them how, they can protect themselves by really focusing on those stranger danger types of occurrences. So always sort of being aware in parking lots and, throwing somebody over their shoulder who approaches you in the dark. And I really just saw how it was sort of missing the mark. That so often people who are targets of gender-based violence are experiencing harm with people that they know, in situations that are around people that they know, and the vast majority are in those situations, right? So we know that 80% of sexual assaults happen with somebody that that the perpetrator is an acquaintance, a friend, somebody you're dating, a family member, and not really the scenarios that those traditional self-defense classes teach. And on top of that, right, there's this vibe that if you don't learn these tactics, if you don't, limit your life in some way, then you're just asking for trouble. And I really wanted to eliminate that from my approach. So when I started teaching my own self-defense workshops, I really just wanted to offer women and targets of gender-based violence something that was realistic, something that didn't make them more afraid, but allowed them to see what they were capable of. And I think having that led by a woman who's not taking this sort of hypermasculine approach and really honoring the ways that we already protect ourselves, right? I imagine everybody listening has done something, whether they consider it self-defense or not, to protect themselves. And it's something that was just kind of embedded in our daily lives. So I really wanted to honor that. And so, that was sort of the start of my journey into the self-defense world.
So interesting. And I mean, I feel like even just shifting it into that lens makes it feel so much more powerful, but also, more realistic. Like, yes, we all hear the scary stories of things that do go on for sure, of people don't look if someone put a piece of paper in your windshield wiper, jump right in your car, lock the door, all of that. But that's not what most of those situations are. So I would love to hear kind of your take on why that is. That data is out there and it's findable, right? So why are so many of these self-defense classes, or even just the way that even news articles are framed and all of that, not taking violence against women as serious of an issue as it is, not wanting to admit that the men that we know actually do behave in these ways? Or what?
I think it's an excellent question, because it seems it is, because it is puzzling, right? I think there's probably a few things going on. And I think that you're right. The one part of it is that, what do we do when we realize, or when we allow ourselves to realize or accept that the people who cause harm, sexual violence, sexual harm, gender-based violence, whatever it is, don't have to be what we perceive as monsters, right? We think that in our mind's eye, and the media helps us along with this, right? That you have to be a monster to cause harm. And we know that yes, monsters cause harm, but regular people cause harm too, particularly because our culture, right, prescribes this version of masculinity that is about domination, right? And to prove your manhood, you dominate, you want to have power over somebody. And of course, hashtag not all men, but, right, this is a trend. This is a stereotype. This is something that does exist, right? So you have to purposely go against these prescriptions of manhood, and like that pursuing sex and at all costs, right? So this idea of like masculine virility. And so I think that as a culture, we're not ready to quite tackle that yet. I think we're getting there. And it's hard to, it's hard. What do you do when, right, we love this idea of like the safe, good man who's going to protect us.
Yeah.
But what do we do with the fact that like if you're on a date and your date who's a man offers to walk you home, and it's not the walk home that's statistically the most dangerous, but it's the person you're with who's statistically more likely to cause you harm.
Right.
So that's a real tricky thing, I think, to kind of digest. And on top of that, I think that people who are teaching these self-defense classes don't have the experience of what it feels like to have harm caused by somebody, right? And so this sort of sensational, I was attacked, blah, 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 out and somebody jumped out from behind the bushes. Oh, that's so alarming, right? That's so scary. But there's something much more insidious about how harm is caused in those private scenarios, right? Where maybe you didn't even know what was happening. And then before it's too late, or, it's just much harder to kind of parse and sort of make sense of. And so it's an easier sort of picture to understand when we think about somebody jumping out from behind the bushes.
There's no accountability there.
And so I think that that's a big part of it. And people aren't really it's much harder to kind of get into the weeds and think about how this is all baked into the system.
Yeah, no kidding. It's hard for people to kind of acknowledge that. But if we really think about why that might be, it's like domestic violence in like a marriage or whatever. It wasn't even actually like illegal till the 90s. So it's like we haven't even been protected by the law for so long.
Right.
So
it's a word for sexual harassment, and it wasn't until the 70s that women started to be like, hey, you know what? There's this thing that's happening and I don't have a word for it. We didn't even have a collective understanding of it. And so then to now, make it mainstream to strategize and to think about how we change that culture, I think we're moving in that direction. It just takes time.
Yeah, definitely. So kind of in our like pre-conversation, you mentioned how like in this conversation too, how violence is a symptom of oppression. So obviously like violence is a form of control. And I think that's why this conversation is so important right now in particular. Because not that I want to dive into politics, because it's truly not a fun time right now, but here we are and we must. And, we see these people that are being elected right into the top have a very serious history of enacting violence against women, sexual and otherwise. And also the way that they speak about women in that way of like that they are allowed to enforce their power over women, which then trickles down, emboldening young men and old adult men also, unfortunately, to speak about women that way and also to treat women that way. So it's pretty safe to say that violence against women will most likely increase in these next 4 years, which is really scary. But I think that's why it's important to be having these conversations and not just like accepting it as, well, that's how things are. So I'd love to hear your input on what are other ways or like maybe more common, like normalized ways that we see women as a group being controlled.
So I think you really hit the nail on the head. And I think that there is a correlation and that it's important in understanding what's happening, right? To kind of to make sense of this correlation of somebody in office who's, been elected to office, who basically is advocating being an authoritarian figure, right? So to have power over others, to exert dominance, and that is correlated, right? That type of behavior, that type of thinking, and that type of this version of masculinity that seems to be on the rise, right? It's this backlash against Me Too. It's this backlash against this, recognition of what's been happening and a reclamation of our rights, right? And our agency. Yeah. And so, you know what? Then it's this backlash where we're going to champion this version of dominance and masculinity. And so how triggering that, and not surprising that so many of these individuals, right, have this history of sexual assault, because domination, power over, sexual assault, and violence against marginalized people are, part of the equation. And so when I'm teaching my self-defense workshops, I like to bring up this idea of the continuum of violence. And so if you imagine a continuum, just like a line going from left to right, on the left side, you have sort of harmless, and I put harmless in quotations, annoying, things that we don't necessarily consider.
It's not physically harmful.
Exactly. It's not violence, right? But things like, maybe somebody taking up your space, maybe somebody speaking over you, little things that just assert control or domination, and maybe
taking credit for your ideas.
Taking credit for exactly, right? Oh, we don't say that that's violent, but does it assert dominance? Is it a part of trolling somebody, right? That individual, because of their sort of marginalized identity, they don't get a say. They're not, they don't get to take up as much space, right? And as we sort of inch along that continuum, we see things like, and feel free to shout out if you think of something, right? Mm. But now maybe insults or sexist jokes or online harassment, things that, okay.
Your body, my choice.
Which I would say kind of is like really scooting along that quite.
It's so confusing too, and I feel like you've definitely touched on this a bunch, but it is so confusing of like, it's not black and white. They're not saying this or that, but it's like you're feeling a little weird,
You're insinuating a lot.
Yeah. Caitlin really nailed it, right? The idea is that you are feeling weird, and that's the red flag. Right?
Yeah.
That's the moment where you say, you know what, this feels uncomfortable. That's all you need. You don't have to say, well, this person intended to do that. Okay, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Sometimes we can't pin that down, right? But if you are feeling like you're being controlled, somebody's dominating your space, that's enough for you to think, hey, I can set a boundary around this. Whether I flag that person in my mind as somebody who, might not respect my boundaries or might be in that space of domination, I know that that's a person that I might keep my distance from. Mm-hmm. Or if it's somebody that you are interacting with on a regular basis, it's something that you can set a boundary around. And then, right, when we set that boundary, notice how they respond. So do you get pushback? Do you get gaslighting? No, that's not what I did. That's not what I intend. Okay, right? That's another point of information and can be another red flag for you. Do they listen and accept what you said and respect the boundary? Because that'll show you a lot, right? This person, somebody who's willing to and open to hearing what my boundaries are and respecting those. And so, right, it's really on this line of like control and domination and manipulation, because ultimately, right, the forms of violence that we all consider to be bad, overt physical violence, overt sexual violence, are clear. But it's all the stuff in between that shows us that, and that kind of primes us as a group and as individuals to just think that it's normal to not take up space, to not deserve to have a voice, to be catcalled on the street, right? Like, oh, okay, it's harmless. No, it's not. No, it's not, right? Because we then walk the world self-conscious of what's going to happen, not feeling safe, like we can walk the streets safely, or walk into the office and feel like comments, and I think a lot of this stuff has been starting to be cracked down upon, but right, have our bodies open to comment, to criticism. All of it plays a role in our collective sort of oppression and how vulnerable to violence we are.
Yeah, no kidding. And I think it starts from such a young age. And now I think,
yes,
our generation is parenting our kids much differently. But all the things that you're describing right there as, teenage women, adult women, it's just like constantly reminding you to just like shut your gut up and ignore it, because like that's just what we deal with. It's okay. It's not that serious. But like that is a learned thing from so young. Like, oh, just give your uncle that hug. Who cares? Like, don't complain. Be palatable.
Absolutely. And too, because we see things, right? We see things happen to other people.
Yeah.
We learn that we can keep ourselves safe by pleasing other people, right? That if we de-escalate the situation, which, listen, any way that you choose to keep yourself safe, I advocate for, right? Like your body, your everything. I trust that you keep yourself safe the best way that you can in the moment. And so that's not a criticism on like any type of strategy for safety, but it's a cultural critique that, women, feminine embodied people have been taught that if we speak up, we're criticized, right? If we set a boundary, we're bitchy. And so even if that consequence isn't physical, which in the back of our minds, that physical danger is always looming, right? The people who have power are oftentimes men, right? So if we don't want to be criticized at work, if we don't want to be criticized in our friend group, it's always just about sort of suppressing your own needs, making somebody else comfortable. Mm-hmm. And I think that can, as a whole, really, wears us down over time and conditions us to speak up less and less, and to really, like you kind of mentioned, shoving down our sort of those gut instincts and our intuition.
Yeah.
And prioritizing somebody else's comfort.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
It's like a personality trait. Amanda and I always kind of joke back and forth of like, we're people pleasers, but it's like, we really are. And it's uncomfortable to sit in the uncomfortable situation, right? Like,
yes.
And it's part of, I guess,
relearning how to not.
Like being okay with feeling uncomfortable and not thinking that it's your fault for setting those boundaries or having those hard conversations.
Yes. And I would venture to guess, and I deal with this too. I am not immune to any of this. But I think that when we people please, we're already uncomfortable, right?
Yeah. You're doing it because you're uncomfortable too. Yeah.
Oh, right. Wanting to protect other people from discomfort. And so we take it on ourselves and we think, you know what, I will just sort of handle this discomfort so that nobody else, or that there's harmony within the group, right? Because that group harmony, and whether this is biological, whatever, socialized, it's a combination of both, right? Harmony in the group signifies safety. And so I will absorb what I don't want to create this harmony. And I think that as we all start to learn about boundaries, about respecting each other's boundaries, about giving space for our own needs, that, we can create harmony in groups and actually create more closeness together by speaking our needs.
Yeah.
And that when you speak your need to somebody else, you're actually opening, it's an invitation for closeness. And that's something that therapy has taught me. Right?
Yep. Yeah.
Well, therapist is going to be proud of this.
Well, my therapist always says, I'm always proud of you. I'm always proud of you, because I'm always like, you're going to be so proud of me. And she's like, no.
Oh,
I always am proud of you. I'm like,
so nice.
No. But really this time. Okay, so you started to touch on this a bit in terms of kind of analyzing how someone receives your boundaries and how they react to that. But can we dive into that a little bit deeper in terms of, there are a lot of women, we do have some listeners that are, in their 20s and, getting into these serious relationships and dating and everything. And if they didn't have a good example of what that healthy back and forth is and what those healthy boundaries look like, they might not know how to identify some of those like red flags, those like controlling behaviors that then can lead to physical violence, sexual violence, or just emotional abuse. And it's crazy that like we don't just teach this to girls, but we don't. So can you mention some more of those like red flag behaviors, even in like early interactions with people?
Sure. I mean, and I also want to kind of widen the net that, when you, I work a lot with college students. And so you get college students coming in onto campus for the first time, making new friends, right? Making new relationships, having new interactions with a lot of people. And this just goes for everybody. Then it also includes your friendships, right? Do you have friends who are not great with boundaries or who are harming you in some way, and maybe unintentionally, but like being able to create boundaries around that? Because a lot of times, it depends on people, whatever on your own personality, right? Who are you more comfortable setting boundaries with? What scenarios, what situations? I would say when you walk away from an interaction with anybody and you feel not as good about yourself as you did, right? So whether there were kind of like backhanded compliments or people criticizing you in some way, I think that's, you assess, I feel, I'm not feeling great, right? I'm not, wow, what was that? That's that internal sort of like yellow flag or red flag that you're not feeling great when you leave somebody, leave an interaction with somebody. Somebody who works around your no, right? If you say no to something and then they try to convince you otherwise, that goes with friends or new relationships altogether. Somebody who's pushing to have more closeness than you're ready for. And I think in relationships, some relationships, one of the tricky things, because it can feel really great in the beginning, is something like love bombing, where we know that, a lot of like narcissistic abusers use this tactic of love bombing to sort of like get you addicted to them. And then, but really it's a manipulation tactic. So then that's a little bit confusing, right? So somebody who's just like really pouring it on thick might be a pause, might make us want to pause, because that can then over time lead to sort of some more overtly or obvious manipulation tactics, like, wanting you to have less interaction with your friends, wanting you to, give them all of your time and attention.
Yeah.
So really, but it is really about creating a practice where you're getting in touch with your senses, right? With your feelings, with your intuition, right? If you're feeling some sort of way, rather than being like, why am I feeling like that? This is nice. This is good. I really like this person. And when you really like a person, sometimes that can be hard because you want to do anything to get that person to like you. And so you just like forget all of the sort of internal flags that are like, no, I want this. This is where, I'm going to make this happen.
Yeah, you're describing all of my 20s.
Right. And so for many of us, right, and I'm hoping that young people learn this younger and younger, right? And they get more and more practice. And I think, like you said, with parenting tactics where we're now not forcing children to, accept hugs and kisses from their relatives, I think these are starting to become a little bit easier. But yeah, these were hard learned lessons for many of us. And I think this work is lifelong work, right?
Definitely. It's like constant unlearning.
Right. And then, recognizing that if somebody is being pushy or acting like you've ruined, like this, so like the pattern of narcissistic abuse, like idealizing a person and then blaming them for all of your problems. That's a whiplash, right? And so, really caring, and I think this is sort of at the root of so much, caring more about yourself, your own comfort, your own well-being than anyone else's.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not easy.
Which, yeah, we're not.
Been raised otherwise.
Yeah.
Like every day having a practice where you care more about your well-being. And it doesn't mean you have to be cruel to other people. Boundaries don't have to be mean. I think we have in our mind that the only way to set a boundary is to yell at somebody. No, right? If we set those boundaries early enough and see those sort of red flags or just pushy boundary violating behaviors early enough, we can sort of navigate them much easier than, when something has escalated further.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what you teach in your workshops for those instances when the boundary violations have escalated? Like what tools you give, the women at your workshops?
I really love to focus on, and I think that, the magic in what I teach is so much in catching things before they escalate. So the form of self-defense that I teach is empowerment self-defense. And so it is actually a well-studied, with large, randomized controlled studies that show that participants of empowerment self-defense programs are actually reporting fewer instances of assault attempts. So, their peers will say, like, maybe they got out of the situation, but there was an assault attempt. People who are taking empowerment self-defense are not having the same rate of assault attempts. So it really kind of suggests that the success here is in being able to see the warning signs, set boundaries early, and not be in those situations that have escalated.
Yeah.
But to your question, I want to just focus on like a principle, like a core principle in sort of a physical escalation and even sort of any type of escalation. So I really focus on distance management, right? So if you can manage the physical distance between you and another person, staying far enough away that they can't touch you easily, right? Then you can mitigate harm. I, having a jiu-jitsu background, teach techniques where you're on your back and you have your legs sort of in the air, pointed at somebody, and you can use your legs to create distance. So this really lends itself to situations of intimate partner violence, where you can be kind of laying down and use your legs to create distance by putting your feet on their hip bones. Of course, there's different escalations, right? You can kick somebody in the head from there, or you can just create distance.
Kick them elsewhere also.
You can kick them anywhere.
So sign.
The issue is, right, a lot of times in situations, people aren't going to just escalate to a kick if the situation doesn't feel like it calls for it, right? Just because of our social conditioning. But it's there if you need it to be. You can also just manage the distance between you and another person by using your feet on their hip bones and pushing back. And so I think that this, because when you're laying on your back, it's certainly a position that feels quite vulnerable, and you think, well, I got no options from here. But just the act of kind of being like, oh, when you use sort of some technique, right, and the strongest sort of manipulating and using the body mechanics in your favor, you can actually have quite a bit of control. But of course, right, this stuff takes practice, but it's a good sort of concept to keep in place.
Yeah, no kidding. And I think listeners and of course people that take your workshops probably really appreciate the fact that it really focuses on, it's not up to us to end violence or to, avoid. I mean, yeah, like, of course we want to avoid violence, but like,
yeah,
it's not our fault that this stuff happens, regardless of what anyone makes you think. You could be walking down the street butt ass naked and no one has the right to touch you or do anything. So how do you make sure that the training doesn't like encourage that victim blaming mentality? Is it
So
language swaps or?
Yes, I start from the very beginning, making that clear. It's one of my core principles, right? That violence is never our fault. It is always the fault of the perpetrator. And I think that you walk this sort of tricky line when you're teaching self-defense, because historically the narrative has been victim blaming. But instead, the way that I describe it is like, there are lots of ways that we can safeguard or, promote our well-being. We can eat healthy. We can do yoga classes. We can meditate, right? All of the things that, you just want to do for yourself. Knowing, right, that we live in a world that violence and boundary violating behaviors are common. We can learn some strategies that are proven to be effective to safeguard our well-being. If, we can never guarantee safety. We can't guarantee that somebody's not going to do, or we'll figure out the right, combination of strategies to prevent somebody from harming us. But, we can do things to mitigate our risk. And I think that if we have those strategies, if we know those exist, then people who are vulnerable to violence deserve to have access to them. Doesn't mean that you have to, or you deserve something. No, right? We're learning about bystander intervention, right? How can we be better advocates for each other? Well, also, how can we be better advocates for ourselves so that we can be our own protectors as well, rather than relying on a perpetrator not to perpetrate or a bystander to intervene?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it can feel like super discouraging and heartbreaking and frustrating and, a whole slew of emotions that I can't find the words for when, we see these stories like right now all over because of the trial, Lake and Riley, who did everything that, we're taught to do. It's the middle of the day. You're in a crowded park. Multiple people had her location. She told people what her roots were. She fought back so hard. And it still didn't even matter, And so like how can attending these workshops or finding these techniques, help us to protect ourselves and, I don't know, kind of like push past those feelings of like, well, there's nothing that I can even do.
Well, I think it's important that we take a moment, right, to like feel the grief and the shittiness of that situation.
Yeah.
And of people like that. Yeah. And that does happen in this world. And there's no, like I mentioned, there's no guarantee of our safety, which drives home the point, right, that changing our culture is more important than ever, right? Then it's just like, see,
yeah,
everybody, like this is like a very important issue, and this is what we get when we have misogyny, sexism and misogyny and masculinity. Okay. However, right, I also want to caution and just mention that the fear that we all feel when these instances happen are harmful. We all experience harm when we're afraid, when we want to think twice about living our lives and going for a run. It's not that the fear is unjustified, but that it has this impact on us all. And there is a skewing of the media, right? We do as a culture love to focus on pretty white girls who get hurt running.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make it any less horrifying that happened, but our attention and how it drives us all to limit ourselves further, right? Well, then I'm not going to go for a run. I can't I can't go out, I can't do this, I can't live my life fully. And so I think that everybody has to make their own decisions about their safety and about their comfort level, and I support that. There is this almost like, to me, political drive to be like, no, like you're not going to make us stop living our lives.
Yeah.
And I think that empowerment self-defense courses that teach some tangible strategies, it doesn't mean that somebody who was harmed, if only they had known this wouldn't have happened to them.
Oh,
no,
of course.
right? But does it give us more strategies to utilize in threatening situations, right? Whether that situation is just a social situation or whether it's a worst case scenario, does it give us more control, more confidence, right? And if it does, then that's just adding something that we didn't have before. And I think the more that we can sort of add to our skill set, things that, and our confidence and things that are able to help us, the better. But that feeling of like hopelessness or helplessness is valid too.
Yeah.
And I think that like letting ourselves feel that when it happens is okay.
Definitely.
But that, we can support each other through those feelings, and we can support each other in learning sort of other ways to equip ourselves and feel better about, how we interact in the world.
Yeah, definitely. And like talking about these stories, and even when it's not comfortable, like it's not a comfortable conversation to have, but I think that's also why violence against women in like all forms is something that gets so swept under the rug, is because there's so much shame attached to it too, especially if you're talking about like sexual violence, where it's not comfortable. You don't want to be telling everyone about what happened to you. But especially with, how survivors are treated, in the legal system and otherwise. But also, isn't that why so many men are like, well, none of the guys I hang out with would ever do any of that. None of my friends would ever do that.
Oh yeah.
And there's so many excuses too. It's like you have obviously been saying, it's just so many excuses. Oh, well, they didn't mean that. I don't think that they intended to say it that way, And it's like, stop being a bro.
Yeah.
Do something.
Right. And when we think that, right, like, unless you're on the far end of that spectrum of causing harm and being violent, that it's somehow all that other stuff, right? It's like,
well, we're not sure.
Maybe they just were, they didn't hear you in the boardroom when you said that thing, right? Oh, no, they did. And it's like, I don't even know, how do we convince people? Like, no, man, no, this actually, and it's almost like, you're right. Like when we're able to speak about it.
Yeah. Not that we need to be like trauma dumping on everyone, but like a little. Like, let's be honest about what's really going on here.
I sometimes in conversations will survey my friends, right? Like I sent out a little survey. What percentage of men that you've sexually interacted with have gotten an A grade on boundaries and consent?
Mm-hmm.
And the consensus was 20% got an A.
Yikes.
Thinking that was and fun, and it was interesting because it was the same percent across the board.
Yeah.
And we were like, like about 80% of them were bad, or like some version of not great.
Yeah.
And so that's just the norm. And so most likely, right, some of the men that you are having these conversations with are part of that 80%, whether or not they're like, where on that spectrum, right? But there has to, I think we're learning. And we're sort of in the midst of progress. And in the midst of progress, we see backlash, and we see, like the pendulum swing in the other direction. But
Yeah.
the work of educating people,
Yeah.
the work that we should have to do or not,
Yeah, seriously. But I think that is such a good way of looking at it without feeling like completely discouraged about the way that so many people in this country specifically clearly feel about women. But that is such a good way of looking at it. And so I saw someone else like post this thing right after the election about like this culture of hyper masculinity and, you know, this trending like alpha male culture on social media that's like really breeding the younger generation and older too, which is scary, to think about women in horrible ways. But really like the root of that is because women are more powerful than we've ever been before. Like we're outpacing men in education. We're less likely to live at home with our parents when we're in our late 20s. Like they don't like that. They don't have that power over us anymore. So that backlash is them trying to regain it.
Right. And that's what it's always been about. And it's becoming more and more evident the more we know. Right.
Yeah.
And it's, I hate to see it, but there's almost something that feels like empowering that like, you know what, that's going to work on us now.
Yeah.
We know too much. We have too much power now. And of course, like there will be, you know, not to downplay the harm, but there's a part of me that just like, I think we've come far enough. And even in just the years that I've been doing this work, I've seen, you know, having more and more, I used to, oh my gosh, like the energy I would expend trying to explain feminism to people and try to explain, like, I'm exhausted just thinking about it. So
yeah,
I've felt the difference. I see the backlash that's happening, but I think that I don't think it's going to work on us the same way.
Yeah. And I think it's like, can we look at it as like evidence of how powerful we actually are?
Yeah. People see it for what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at this. Oh, look at this.
Yeah.
The tantrums have started up.
Yeah. We're the emotional ones. Oh, I could just talk to you all day long. And I also want to come to one of your workshops. So
yes,
tell us a little bit more about where people can find you, how they can work with you or learn from you, all the things.
Yeah. So that's a good question. Most of the work that I do right now is for, I come to college campuses.
Oh, I love that.
I will work with your company, right? So if you have a women's resource group or, if you just want to have me come and teach your coworkers, that's sort of where that easiest access to me. If you are local to New York City, I do offer like small classes, private lessons, and stuff like that. But you can find me at feministselfdefense.com. I'm at Feminist Self Defense on Instagram, and my email is booking@feministselfdefense.com. And you can just, feel free to reach out, ask questions. I try to be accessible in general.
So appreciated. Yeah. And we'll link all of that in the show notes and everything so people can find you easily.
Great.
Just thank you. Thank you for taking the time. And thank you for
You're welcome.
Doing the work that you're doing. It's so important. And it's really inspiring.
Yay.
We need that. We need that hope,